Hello my friends and welcome back. Today we're going to try to answer the burning question of the difference and similarities between the Magna Carta Mag 650 that was recently released and is a Goldspot special versus the old Magna Carta Mag 600. Many of us may have heard that the nibs in these are basically the same nib, and would be interested to see how they compare in a direct comparison. So I have two of Magna Carta Mag 600 nibs. The first one that I received, this one, unfortunately wasn't working well, so I got in touch with the folks at Magna Carta and they sent me another nib. The nib is now in this Magna Carta body, and for good measure I have just left the converter on it and did not eyedropper it. And recently, because I do have the two of the Magna Carta Mag 600 nibs, and essentially I use the nib and I'm not really attracted to the pen itself, I did not want to go and then also purchase the Mag 650. Even though it looks a little bit more attractive than the Mag 600, it actually looks a lot more attractive, and it's probably ergonomically a little bit better based on some of the reviews that we've seen. Nonetheless, I wanted to try this to myself. So I have not purchased this, so I got in touch with the customer service at Goldspot Pens and asked if they would borrow me one just to do a comparison. And to my surprise, it was pretty quick response and they're very kind. First, it wasn't in stock, but as soon as they brought it in stock, they immediately actually shipped this to me and I received it within a couple of days. I'd like to thank them for that. So what we're going to do is do a brief scribble with all these three pens and see how they compare to each other. And for those of us who have this pen a little bit outside their price range, I will have this comparison to the Fountain Pen Revolution. Even though this is not much cheaper, I have the Fountain Pen Revolution 14K Gold Ultra Flex nib on the S1 V200. That's on a Bach 250 converter, and we'll see how it compares to the Mag 600 14K nib. Without further ado, we're just going to dig into our original Mag 600. This is the second iteration that I received as a replacement for my not so good working 600 that I first received. So we'll just do some squiggles and see how the nib and feet can keep up. So we'll do some 10 lines. The nib, the ink in here, is Pelikan's Edelstein Golden Lapis, so it's quite shimmery ink. I did dilute a little bit because I didn't want to run out during this testing, but we'll see. So I've had this Mag 600 replacement nib for, I don't know, 6-7 months at least. I have yet to be able to make it railroad or hard start or anything like that. I have been nothing but very, very impressed. If you see the reviews, the general consensus is that it's a very wet nib and it performs very well. It's actually very, very much rivals the vintage flex nibs. There's very little to complain about on this pen. I guess the only thing you can complain is that it is very expensive, so it's around $300 to $400 and not affordable for everybody. So I'm hoping in the future they make a cheaper version of this so that more people can afford it. Or maybe these can go on sale. These do go on sale on various websites that drop them to in mid 200 sometimes. I think at that price this is a very good deal. So even with the very heavily shimmering ink, I don't see a problem. Next we will compare this to the magnificently looking Magna Carta Mag 650, a Goldspot exclusive. It has this stacked resin, kind of looks like the stacked celluloid, maybe a little thicker stacks. Very well polished out of the box. The pen actually sits very well in hand, maybe a little bit more ergonomic compared to the Mag 600. The step down is a little bit less if you compare it to the Mag 600. It's mostly because Mag 600 has a thicker body here. Very nice. So it seems like the section, basically from the section on, these are the same pens. They're made of the same mold. I would not be surprised if the cap fits. It fits. And it didn't destroy my nib, so the cap kind of fits. It's a tight fit, but I don't want to push it too hard. Either way, it seems like from the section onwards, these are pretty much the same pen. The nibs are essentially the same. If you look closely, the newer nib on Mag 650 is engraved with 14K 585. The other version, the one I have, is not engraved. The logo is the same. And you see that the nib pretty much otherwise is the same nib. So from experience also, these two nibs kind of perform similarly. We'll get to this. So let's just get right to it and do a writing sample with the Mag 650. So for this Mag 650, I chose an ink that would complement the pen very well. It's a Monteverde, California teal. I thought it would go very nicely with the pen. Let's get to work. So this nib is relatively new and has not really been broken in. So I will just get at it and see what we can get out of it. Again, thin lines. Very nice and wet. You have to train your hands to not be very heavy on this nib because it flexes very easily. It's a very soft nib. You can get pretty decently thin lines if you put the minimal amount of pressure on it. For example, if I write months of the year, you can see that I can get pretty fine lines with it. It's nice. And then what about pushing it for flex? So if you look at this performance right away, right out of the bat, there's a lot of railroading. If I got this pen just now out of the box and this was my first Mag 600 or Mag 650, I would be super upset because right away it's railroading. What if I push this? So for me to saturate the feed, you can either push the ink in, or just eyedrop it, which I'm not going to do with Goldspot's pen. I'm not going to eyedrop it because I've tried it with Mag 600, it works just fine. Or What I do is I do this. See this ketchup bottle? Put some water in here. Just dip the nib and feed in there briefly. By the way, I did not do that to my Mag 600. So with the hope that the feed and nib are well saturated, we can try this again. So it's not a scientific way of doing things, but you see that it kind of keeps going. So your hope is that this will pick up, the feed will, pick up the pace, and it will keep going. So let's work with this a little bit and see how far we can get. No problem. Once you saturate the nib and feed or prime it, it actually goes on for a long while. This will at some point start to railroad again, but I expect that to also over time improve from my experience with the third pin that we're going to look at. So the third pin I'm going to look at right now is my old Mag 600 that I received first and I ordered my Magna Carta Mag 600. This has kind of been just hanging around as just a nib. Sometimes I put it on some of my favorite Yovo number 6 receivers. This is the Gravitas vac filler, acrylic vac filler. I have filled this with one of the worst shimmering inks in terms of how much shimmer there is. It's a lot, so it really gives the pens a workout. So this is filled with Wet Dominant Industries lapis lazuli, really full of shimmer. But I've had this pen for almost close to a year. Time is flying, and I want to see how this will perform with the very shimmery ink. And initially, I'll link my initial review, and this pen was just such a pain in the neck and very big disappointment. But now we can see that it actually, over time, it is kind of, the feed has started flowing and the nib has started working the way it should. And you can see that the ink output on this, even on this shimmery ink, is just very, very remarkable and is working very good. I feel that I'm a little bit lucky to get one of these pens from the earlier days of the 14K Flex, because comparing this to the newer versions, the newer iterations of the nib, this is at least 30 to 40% softer. It could be that this is just this nib and the quality check is kind of like whatever, but it could also be that the earlier nibs were very flexy and it caused this railroading sometimes, so they thought maybe changing the geometry a little bit and the composition of the nib may mitigate that issue. Either way, after about a year of off and on use of this nib, it seems like it has come around and it started writing very nicely. So I can actually reliably use this pen now. It can get thin lines, as thin or thinner than the other one, the other two nibs, but I'm very impressed actually after about a year of using this, how it has come around and basically being broken in. And it is very usable. You can see very, very rarely it railroads, and it keeps going. And this is one of the worst things you can put in this pen. Imagine like you have a vintage flex nib and you want to put a shimmering ink in it. Forget it. Unless you put that nib inside a modern pen that doesn't really have a sac. Don't be putting shimmering ink into an old Waterman with a latex sac. That's not going to turn out very well. So this nib, very, very satisfied also. Overall, the Magna Carta nibs seem to be performing very, very, very marvelously. Once they get going, you can see that initially the Mag 650, by virtue of being new, was railroading quite a bit. And you see that flooding the feed once it gets it going for quite a while, and I expect this, as you use this, it will railroad less and less and less, and it's going to get used to your writing more and more and more. So I think the lesson I learned here is that if you get one of these pens and it kind of like really makes you mad on your first or second inking, try different inks, try various inks and see what works for. What I've learned is, surprisingly, is that the sweetheart of all inks, the Waterman Serenity Blue, is not the best ink for many of these modern flex nibs. I've seen it really misbehave in Regalia Writing Labs nib, misbehave in some of other the modern flex, like the Zebra G fitted in Fountain in the Flexible Nib Factory. Even the Mont Blanc 149 flex, it misbehaves in those. Whereas some of the other inks, even other Waterman inks and some of the Mont Blanc inks, they do a lot better. So experiment with different inks, and if you get one of these pens that railroads, give it a time. They do have a return period. Give it some time and put some heavy use out of it and see if it comes around. Many times they do. This nib I had initially was terrible. I was really upset and immediately let Magna Carta know, and they were kind enough to send me one. So the lesson learned is to just start using it. Use it and put different inks in it, and don't be shy to just flex it a little bit. Of course, know the limits, don't display the tines because it's hard to replace. Those are my comparisons of the Mag 600 and 650. Essentially, these are the same pens, and to make matters more interesting, Magna Carta recently had a release of Mag 650 in San Francisco Pen Show. That was a San Francisco Pen Show special. So I guess that they're continuing the Mag 600 lineup, Mag 650 lineup in terms of the body style for people that may like smaller pens. That's a welcome addition, actually. So overall, this Mag 650 I would say is a little bit more ergonomic, easier to use if you want to keep the pen. If you want to keep the pen that comes with the nib, definitely a lot more attractive compared to the Mag 600. The one thing to be said is that I really like this clip on the Mag 600, the retro style. Here it is compared to my Waterman 58. It is attractive. It is going for the vintage, except for the ugly yellow they have here. Maybe they should tone down on the yellowness of this gold plating here. Otherwise, it is not an ugly pen. It just probably needs some refinement. Speaking of this, maybe we'll have a review of this later. This is currently one of my top 3 favorite pens in my collection that's largely dominated by the more modern pens. So the one thing I would like to bring up is that what if these pens are out of our reach? What I've done is I had the Fountain Pen Revolution 14K Ultra Flex nib, and I had it with their pen. Actually purchased this with their pen. Their pen runs out of ink within a page and half of writing. The ink capacity here is not good. The feed that comes with this Fountain Pen Revolution gold nib is not well optimized, so it leaks all over the place. I feel like the customer service can use some help there. Nonetheless, the Ultra Flex nib here is very, very nice, and I was able to put that on one of the feeds that come with the Ultra Flex steel nibs for Bach 250, and the whole leaking problem disappeared. So I have Mont Blanc Emerald Green ink in here, and we're going to take a look. So that's a brief comparison of this pen. It is, if you're into finicking with the pens and modifying them, this pen can get you a lot more line variation and has actually, dare I say, a lot more ink output compared to the Magna Carta. It can get at least 1.5 times the line variation. I don't know about longevity of these nibs. They're ultra flex and they are well shaped on the sides, so I don't know how long they'll last the tines. I've had the Mag 600 for about a year. It has not displayed far, and then the Fountain Pen Revolution I've had for 6-7 months. The nib has worked fine. I have pushed this also. It's not like I've been nice to it. So these work very well, and as an alternative, you can try to get this. You can find the gold Ultra Flex nib on a bulk housing from Fountain Pen Revolution. I think they sell it for about $180 on sale sometimes. So that's about half the price of the Mag 600 if you want to, if you're into that kind of situation. So those were my comparisons of these pens. I would recommend any one of these that you can get your hands on. The Mag 650 is a very, very nice writer. It's a beautiful pen, very nice. It comes in different colors. It comes in at least 2 other finishes. I say take a look at them, and if it's within your budget, absolutely you will not go wrong in getting one of these pens. And if you have to deal with the US customer service, that would be nicer in my opinion, compared to having to go to the manufacturer website. That's a little bit more of a pain in the neck. Those are my comparisons, and I hope that you find this informative and maybe just a little bit entertaining. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.